Tanu Rabbanan Mitzvas Chanukah. Very fast recap. We're doing the deep dive about different details about Chanukah. So we looked at what it says in the Gemara about Chanukah, and we said, okay, you got to light the candles of the menorah, and what time do you light it from? Sunset until the traffic of the marketplace season. What is that supposed to mean? We're talking about the traffic of the marketplace. It's talking about the Tamar Dai. They sold wood because people would go home. Do we have wood? No, so we go. And once they were gone, then that's it. Everybody's at home now. So sunset until nobody's left in the marketplace, basically. Then we did other things about learning about how technically you'd only have to light one candle for an entire household, and each night you only light one candle. That would be the basic mitzvah of Hanukkah. But if you want to do a higher level, more mahadran as they call it, take the mitzvah to the next level, then each person will light one candle. But if we're going to do the highest way possible, like take it to the highest next level, then Beis Hillel said you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Beis Shammai said 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Beis Shammai said the reason why we do 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is because it's like the bowls of sukkahs that decreased in number. So we're not looking at what the potential for it is, we're looking at what the actual is. First there's 8 days of Hanukkah, then 7 days of Hanukkah. That's where we're going down. And Beis Hillel says, no, that's not the reason. It's because we always add in matters of holiness. So we always want to go up. So they don't disagree with each other. They just have different takes on why the numbers are going this way or that way. Which means that the reason hasn't been refuted. So there's something to be said about the reason, even though that's not what we follow. But we know that we follow Beis Hillel, that we do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then it also talks about you're supposed to light the menorah outside, and if not by the window, if not on a table. And then the Gemara tells us about the story of Hanukkah. The Greeks went in, they won the war, and then they went in, they defiled all the oil. Not that they smashed the oil, they defiled it, they made it impure, and they found one that still had the seal of the high priest, so it wasn't defiled, and it lasted for 8 days, and that's boom, now we have Hanukkah. So then we had a bunch of questions. We want to know, what does bowls of sukkahs have anything to do with Hanukkah? We know they're both 8-day holidays, but they don't seem to be the same thing. What's going on here? We want to know if we're celebrating the menorah and the Beis HaMikdash. Why do we have 8 lamps, 8 lights, and not 7, the way the menorah did? Back to the bowls of sukkahs. There must be some sort of connection to the fact that they're both 8-day holidays. As in, first we're starting with the 8-day holiday, and then we see that comes out as Hanukkah and Sukkot, so that means something up here in the higher realms is connected, and that's how they manifest in this world as 8-day holidays. The last one is why are we lighting at sunset instead of during the day? Pints of everything, the point of Hanukkah lights is to illuminate the darkness. We went into a whole thing about oil. Oil doesn't mix with other liquids, it's separate. Compacting everything all together, what the Greeks were trying to do, why they defiled the oil, is because they were trying to remove God from religion. It doesn't matter if you study Torah, but don't study God's Torah. The Purim story is that Haman wanted to destroy our bodies. The Greeks didn't want to destroy us physically, they wanted to destroy us spiritually. That's the difference between the Hanukkah miracle and the Purim miracle. The Greeks, anybody who became Hellenized, they didn't have a problem with them. That's what they wanted. The problem that they had was the people who held on to the God spark. So why 8 and not 7? Because if you remember, we did a whole thing about how 8 is above the natural order of things. That's the whole thing about what is holiness. Separateness is beyond nature. 7 is a full cycle, and 8 is one above. We get back to it. We talk about the menorah and the harp. The main punchline is the point of the Hanukkah light, of the Hanukkah menorah, is to illuminate the darkness, which is also why I think we mentioned it. The windows in the Beis HaMikdash were opposite. It wasn't a narrow slit that widened on the inside. It was a narrow slit that widened on the outside. Because the Beis HaMikdash spreads light to the world. It doesn't take in light from the world, it gives light to the world. The Beis HaMikdash is the spiritual center point of the world, of spirituality. So the point of the Hanukkah lights is to illuminate the spiritual darkness, which is part of why it's at sunset, because we're illuminating the darkness kind of thing. Why? Because the Greeks wanted to take the God spark out of Torah. They didn't care if we studied Torah as a book, as a subject. They didn't care about that. There's a lot of wisdom. There's a lot of great stuff in there. They wanted the God spark to be taken out. I do this because God said so. That's what they were trying to erase. We had a little bit more into that. We spoke about the relationship of Jews serving God, just the service of a servant. You do it out of fear. You do it because God's the king, so you do as he says. That's one element of our service. And the other one is the divine will is equally at the core of all the mitzvahs. As in, well, it goes back. I'm doing this because God said so. Whatever the mitzvah is, this is God's will. There's not one mitzvah that's more God's will than another. We went into the whole thing that because it's God's will, it's also because we can never fully fathom it. So even the mitzvahs that we sort of have some understanding of, we don't really understand it. Or for example, let's say when it comes to tefillin, it should be a sign between your eyes. Okay, well, what does that mean? So the oral law will tell us this is what its tefillin looks like. It's a box and it's black, so now we know how to actually fulfill it. But in truth, we don't really know, why is it a square? Why is it a square box? How come it's not a rectangle? Why do the compartments look like this and not like that? Why are the straps black? We don't actually have explanations for that. We just know that the sign between your eyes looks like tefillin. But the deeper explanation behind tefillin, we don't actually know it. Because everything is so far above us. Even the things that we know, it's kind of just something for us to kind of comprehend, but it's so far removed from what God's will is. The point is that it goes back to the whole idea is that we're not doing these things because we understand it. And we're not even doing it because it's rational to say, I've determined that I can no longer understand it, and therefore I give myself up to the godness. It's not even because of that. There is no other option. Do so because God said so. This is why we do because God said so. All the other thing else, it doesn't matter. Okay, afterwards, maybe try to find other things, but because God said so. There is no option but to fulfill his will. That's why we do Torah mitzvahs, and that's what the Greeks were trying to eradicate. Which is why Hanukkah is really a spiritual holiday. Which ironically, today it's one of the most secular Jewish holidays. So it's like they forget, like what we're celebrating, right? Hanukkah should be a time where everybody renews their commitment to Judaism. More than Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. Also, Yom Kippur, that we're doing just because we want to be on good behavior. But Hanukkah, that's what we're actually celebrating. And then we spoke about how reaching that kind of level, I do because God said so, that reaches the highest level of the soul. That's the level of the soul where self-sacrifice can occur, because it makes no sense, self-sacrifice, right? Not existing anymore or whatever it is. But that's a level that's so high up it can't be touched. You can't rationalize with that which cannot be rationalized, because we've removed rationality from the picture. As soon as there's rationality involved, you could have an argument, you could taint it, per se. But the level of the soul, this fifth level that it reached, is so far above all of it, the Greeks, metaphorically, like the Greeks couldn't touch it, even that. Which is represented by the small cruse of oil that they found still. The seal of the high priest on it. Then it went into the whole thing about going to 8 versus 7. 7 is the natural order of things, and 8 is one above. Which is why they said in the Beis Hamikdash, the first two, they had the harps were 7-string harp, and in Messianic times, there's going to be an 8-string harp. Because 8 is one more above, and then we went back to the whole thing about the Tarmudai, the wood choppers. Why is it until they cease, until their footsteps cease? Because Tarmudai, the word for it, comes from mered, rebellion. We have to light the candles until rebellion against God ceases. That's what we're able to do. Not just that it ceases, but that they too will develop a yearning for God. That's why that's the time frame for lighting the menorah. Practically, it's because that's when people see it. Like, oh, we see the menorah, we remember God's miracles, and we're celebrating God. But in the spiritual sense, it's we are weakening and lessening and defeating rebellion against God, to the point that we're also turning it over that they too shall have a yearning for God. And that brings us back to the bulls of Sukkot, because why the bulls of Sukkot? The first 7 days of Sukkot, there were 70 bulls offered in total, and those were the bulls representative of the 70 nations of the world, like the 70 parent nations of the world. This is what we ended up with last time, that it said if the nation of the world only understood the protections, the blessings that were brought down to them through the sacrifice of the bull, not only would they not have destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, but they would have put extra guard around it. They would have protected it from anybody else. So that's the idea of it's not just that you're weakening the opposition, but the opposition is now developing the yearning for godliness. You're not just weakening those who would destroy the Beis Hamikdash, say, oh, we no longer will destroy the Beis Hamikdash anymore, but we'll also protect it, adding to what already was. Which in general, that's the whole idea of Sukkot. You had the first 7 days of sacrifices, those were the nations of the world. Then the last day, Shmini Atzeres, is the 8th day. 8th day, it doesn't specifically celebrate anything except for us being with God. There's an extra sacrifice that's brought that day, only one, but you can't have it without the first 7. You have to have that 7 there to get to the 8. Sure, there's other ways too, but this is how we're doing it here. But that Sukkot plus 1, we get that extra sacrifice, that extra day with God, only after gone through the 7 first. That's what we ended up with last time, and then we actually have a few phrases here. It just solidifies this idea of the nations, that they'll help us and look after us kind of thing, and what we're defeating is the rebellion against God, and the numbers they go down is because the opposition to God is lessened, is weakened. That's why it goes to 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7. It's going down because we're defeating the opposition of the nations. Basically, all the people will turn to serve God. That's what Stefania says. Transform the people to serve him as one. All the people will serve God as one. Well, recognize that God is it. Yeshaya said, Isaiah says, the foreigners will rise and shepherd your flocks, meaning they're going to want to participate in the service. And they'll say, don't worry, we'll look after your sheep. You guys go do what you got to do kind of thing. It's a similar sort of idea of wanting to participate in this, wanting to be part of, not just that there's no opposition anymore, but now that they're actually contributing. We sort of did this already, but here we'll just see it in text. This explains about the 8th day of Sukkot. The 8th day shall be a time of restriction for you. You shall not perform any mundane work. In the Torah, when it's talking about the different holidays, we're in the holidays of the 7th month. The first of the 7th month is going to be what we call Rosh Hashanah. The 10th of the 7th month is what we know as Yom Kippur. And then it goes to the 15th of the 7th month is going to be Sukkot. And it's going to be 7 days. But now we have an 8th day. So the 8th day, B'yom HaShmini Atzeres, it's going to be a day of no work. It's a holiday for you. The text underneath it, this is Rashi. Rashi is the foremost commentator of the Torah. This is his explanation of things. It says, Atzeres Yelachem, Atzerim B'asiyas Melacha. As in, it's going to be restriction from working. Atzeres comes from the word of La'atzor. Atzor, which means to stop. That's what Shmini Atzeres is. As in, we stop everything. We're just having a day. Another interpretation, another explanation that Rashi gives us, restrain yourselves from leaving. This teaches that they were required to remain in Jerusalem overnight. This word Atzeres is expounded by God as follows. For throughout the days of the festival, they brought offerings symbolizing 70 nations. And when they came to leave, the omnipresent God said to them, please make me a small feast so that I could have some pleasure from you alone. After they had 7 days of feasting and celebration, God said, whoa, stop. Stay another day, we'll have a small feast. The next part explains this a little bit more. You shall offer up a burnt offering, a fire offering for a spirit of satisfaction to the Lord, 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs in the first year, all unblemished. This verse is about sacrifices that were offered on the 8th day. So we see there's a bull, there's a ram, and there's 7 lambs in the first. Remember, the bulls until now, the first 7 days, we had 13 bulls, 12 bulls, 11 bulls, etc., equaling 70. Now, this last day, the day of stop, just hang out with me, there's 1 bull, not 70, not 10, not any other number. 1 bull and 1 ram, these correspond to Israel, the Jewish people. God said, remain with me a little longer. It expresses his affection for Israel. It is like children taking leave of their father, who says to them, it's difficult for me to part with you, stay 1 more day. It is analogous to a king who made a banquet, etc., and on the last day his closest friend makes a small banquet for the king. General idea, this 8th day, it says it's a day of stopping, don't work. Fine, we have that idea. Then it says, okay, you're going to have a bull and a ram, etc. What's the 1 bull, the 1 lamb? It's not like the 70 nations, this is the Jewish people. Why? Because everybody came for the feasting and the partying, and God says, no, stay, I want to have an intimate meal, I want to have a private meal. And not just that, it's like when everybody comes to visit the parents, and the whole family's at home, and everything's all nuts so crazy, then all of a sudden everybody's about to leave, and the parents are like, no, stay 1 more day. That's what Shemoneh Atzeres is, just a day with us and God. Now we understand at least what the connection between Chanukah and Sukkot is, the bowls of Sukkot. The connection is the Chanukah lights are illuminating the darkness till even those who rebel against God will be weakened in their opposition and will come over, develop a yearning for God. The bowls of Sukkot, they decrease in number, they stand for the nation of the world, weakening their opposition to God to the point of them coming over and wanting to contribute to the spiritual service. That's where the connection is. Now with that, remember we're spoken about the heel, so all the way even down to the heel. Avraham, Akev is Akev, heel, so Avram down to his heel will fulfill God. So the times that we're in now, especially the Rebbe used to refer to this a lot, we're in what's called the Ikvasa de Mashiach, which are the heels, footsteps / heels of Mashiach. So why do we light the Chanukah menorah at sunset? Because we live in a time of doubled and redoubled darkness, as in the exile is so thick, the spiritual darkness is so heavy, to the point that a lot of people don't even realize what kind of exile we're in. Well, no, life is not too bad here. I got a beach house. And it has a fully stocked bar. So what's the complaint about? You think you're happy, but you're not really happy. This is just physical material pleasure. It's called a doubled, redoubled darkness. That's how thick the spiritual darkness is. When the Shekhinah is the light of God, the part of God that creates the world and dwells in the world, is at the level of heel. It seems to be so low because of the thick darkness we live in. The purpose of the exile that we live in is to awaken a level of service of Mesiras Nefesh so darkness transform into light. As in this darkness of the exile that we live in, all the things that we're going into is because it's supposed to awaken within us that deep, deep level of that 5th level of the soul. That level of the soul that there is no other option. Because without the deep challenge, it wouldn't trigger it. Because when the challenge is not as great, the response doesn't have to be so great. But when the challenge has gone that far, well, we better step up to it. So how do we step up? This exile is supposed to awaken within us this level of, we're going to step up. How do we step up with this level of Mesiras Nefesh that we're all in the service of God because God said so kind of thing? Through overcoming our challenges to divine service, especially when the world tells you go one way and we're like, no. The darkness itself leads to a higher level of service that is in transformed into light. People should have a life with of light and not darkness, definitely not pain or suffering. But the fact is that we are here now. So what we can do from it is that the darkness itself, the challenge that we face, can lead us to a higher level. You're never really going to know how strong you are until you're going to be forced to lift something that's a little bit too heavy for you. That's kind of what the darkness of the exile is kind of like that the darkness has become so thick, the only way to overcome it is with a level that's beyond any sort of rationality. Which is actually, we're living in a time where God has been removed from everything. You can't say God, you can't talk about it. People aren't religious anymore, they're spiritual. Even to that level. Oh, okay. How could you be spiritual if there's no God? So the fact is, that's the thickness of the exile we're living. The only way to overcome it, and especially because we have all these challenges to us, is with a level that's beyond that. That's what this exile, that unfortunately has stretched on for too long, that's what this exile will accomplish within us. A level that is beyond any other level. This is from Rambam. Rambam tells us that therefore, throughout the entire year, a person should always see himself as equally balanced between merit and sin, and the world is equally balanced between merit and sin. We're teetering on a scale. If he performs one sin, he tips the balance and that of the entire world to the side of guilt and brings destruction upon himself. That's what the Rambam says. Maimonides says that's how we're supposed to see life. On the other hand, when he performs one mitzvah, he tips his balance and that of the entire world to the side of merit and brings deliverance and salvation to himself and others. This is implied by Proverbs. A righteous man is the foundation of the world, i.e. he who acted righteously tipped the balance of the entire world to merit and saved it. He doesn't specify, only a holy person can look at this. Every single person is supposed to imagine that the entire world is held in a balance. And one action this way is going to tip the scale this way. And one action this way can tip the scale exactly as we need it to. That's what the Rambam says that we're supposed to see, we're supposed to go about the world. That's, first of all, very powerful for all of us to consider. If you have 1,000 pounds of feathers and 1,000 pounds of bricks, what weighs more? Well, they weigh the same amount, exactly. because they're both 1,000 pounds, which means that, let's say the feathers are the good deeds, all you need is one more feather to tip the scale, theoretically, right? One more feather now changes the weight. So it doesn't always have to be something, you don't always have to move the mountain to tip the scale. Any one little thing that we do, any seemingly one little mitzvah or one little thing that we do tips the scale. That's how we're supposed to see the world, the Rambam tells us. Which also should prevent us from doing what we're not supposed to do. Like, this might tip the scale in the wrong direction. I probably shouldn't go there. I'm going to be responsible for this spill. So the Rebbe takes this and he says, if we know that any mitzvah can bring redemption, as in any mitzvahs can tip the scale, surely an increase of Hanukkah lights definitely will tip the scale. Also, bring it back to Hanukkah. Then we'll come to a point. This is a prophecy of Messianic times. Okay, check this out. And this shall be peace, right? We're going to have the time of peace. Should Assyria come into our land, and should they tread upon our palaces, we will appoint over them 7 shepherds and 8 princes of men. Do you notice anything familiar about anything in this? 7 shepherds and 8 princes. Look at 7 and 8. Look at how we get back to 7 and 8. This I took out like the whole thing for you guys to see that. The Gemara tells us, what are we looking at here with the 7 and the 8? What is this? Okay. The Gemara continues, interpreting verses that relate to the end of days. This is a section of the Gemara that's talking about Messianic time. And so it's taking this verse from Micha that was talking about prophecies of those times and says, no, this applies also to Messianic times, which would also be part of the reason why the prophecies were written down, because there's application. It says, this shall be peace when Assyria come into our land, etc. We just read that. 7 shepherds and 8 princes. The Gemara says, it asks, who are these 7 shepherds? So the Gemara explains, David is in the middle. Adam, Shes, and Methuselah is right. So Adam, Shes, his son, is his 3rd son. Cain, Hevel, Cain, and Abel, and then Shes is the 3rd son. That's where we all come from, eventually. So Adam, Shes, Methuselah, he's the one who lived the longest. Methuselah, that's the guy who lived the longest. So he's on one side. The other side is Avram, Yaakov, and Moshe are to his left. Do you remember we did in Tanya the whole thing about Moses being the faithful shepherd? And because he had such a deep belief in God, he gave that over to us that we could also have fear of God. So look, we see we have 7 shepherds. Who are the 8 princes? We saw the 7. Who are the 8 princes? Yishai is the father of King David. Shaul, Saul, King Saul. Shmuel, that's Samuel the prophet. Amos was a prophet. Zephaniah was also a prophet. Tzidkiah was a king. Mashiach and Elijah. We have 7 and 8. Why are we bring up 7 and 8 again? Obviously, we have a lot of verses about Messianic times. Why do we bring up this one here? Well, we know this is going somewhere with the 7 and the 8. These 7 shepherds, these are considered 7 spiritual shepherds. What does a spiritual shepherd do? They feed and they nurture different spiritual elements, part of the Ishtalshalut. The Ishtalshalut, remember, is the chain of descent. It's the order of creation, the 7 complete days. And provide internal spiritual sustenance. So they nourish and nurture a spiritual aspect of ourselves, of us, within the framework of the natural order, within the world that we live in. That's what the spiritual shepherds do. For example, Abraham would be the main spiritual nurturer of love, right? We know that was kind of Avram's thing, because he was all about kindness and giving. His main thing was love. The deep love for God that we can have, it comes from Avram. Avram's the one that nourishes that within us. Yaakov would be the attribute of mercy. We know he stands for his compassion, mercy. That's the blending. It's a perfect blending of love and discipline. So mercy would be something that Yaakov would nurture within us as a spiritual shepherd. Moshe nurtures faith. Like we just said, we have that in Tanya. This awe of God, that's this deep faith of God, that Moshe nurtures within us. The Jewish people draw down these attributes nurtured by the great shepherds. They help us draw it down. Now, what about the 8 princes? The 7 spiritual shepherds, great level, very high levels, and we can achieve very high levels through them, tap into all kinds of things through them, but that's all within the natural order of things. That's 7. The chain of creation, this is the natural world. Now we have 8 princes. The 8 princes provide an energy to serve in a manner that transcends Hishtalshalut. As in, 8, remember, is above creation, above the natural order of things. Unlike a king, a prince is removed from the populace. The king has to be there every day to be with his people. The prince can kind of often do his own thing. The princes possess a transcendent power to fight evil and impurity. That's what it means here with the 8 princes that it's talking about. 8 princes equal to, indicative of, representative of, the 8 Chanukah lights. See how we're bringing all the 8s together now? The Greeks wanted the Jews to forget your Torah. They wanted to forget that it was God's Torah. So, in order to defeat that, we need a transcendent light, as in a light that goes above nature, above the natural order. It has to be elicited for victory. 7 spiritual shepherds, we have everything within the natural order of things. But now we have these 8 princes that can lead us, bring us to a level above. Part of like this whole thing with this maamer and the 7 and the 8, it's not just saying, oh look, this is an 8, and this is an 8, and this is an 8. Let's see how we can find connections to it. What it does is that it's not taking it from this level. It's taking it says, in the spiritual realms, there are things that have connections to each other. And when it manifests in the physical world, it has certain characteristics that now we can kind of trace, now we can see what actually connects to each other. other. We're not going backwards in the connection. We're saying there must be something above in the spiritual worlds that connects them, which is why it manifested in a certain kind of way here in this world. So that's what we're doing with the number 8 here. We're saying the number 8 represents something. So anything that has the characteristic of the number 8, in the physical world, it will have 8 attached to it because it has that attribute that 8 represents. The whole thing about 8 is that it transcends nature. That's what 8 is indicative of, because 7 is complete and 8 is one more. So it's saying there's a lot of things that in the spiritual world, they have this power of being able to transcend nature. So in this world, how do we see what those things are? We see it things that have the number 8. So we say 8 days of Hanukkah, 8 days of Sukkot, the 8 princes, the 8-string harp, the 8 lights of the menorah. All of these things were like, oh, we see the clues now. This is the clue that connects them all to this transcendent level. Things that are not just about, making the physical as much as we can, but reaching a level that's even above what the physical world is, as in what the natural order of things are. Now we wrap up with lots of text. Baloscha. This is actually the name of a parsha also. This is talking about basically, when they built the Mishkan, they built the tabernacle in the desert. And then after that, all the princes of the tribes, there were 12 days that they brought sacrifices. They each brought the same sacrifices, but they each brought sacrifices. The only thing is, the tribe of Joseph was counted as 2. Ephraim and Menashe, both of his sons, were considered 1. Because the Levites didn't bring sacrifices. The tabernacle, the Mishkan is considered their home. So you don't bring a housewarming gift to your own house. So that's all the princes like, oh yay, we're inaugurating the tabernacle. So they'll come to bring sacrifices. We're bringing you gifts. They brought wagons and this. There's a whole thing that everybody brought. Aaron the high priest, he is highest up because he's the high priest of the tribe of Levi, because the Kohan and the priests come from the tribe of Levi. He's watching all this and he's feeling bad about it. He's like, I also want to bring something. God told Moshe, tell him that what you're going to do is going to supersede what they have done. This is what the explanation that we're going to see now that's in here. So it says, when you set up the lamps, that's Ba'aloscha, as in when you light the menorah, that's what it's talking about. Lighting the menorah is part of the service of the Beis Hamikdash. They would do it every day in the afternoon. It was part of the service. This is what was done every day, was lighting the menorah. So when you set up the lamps, this is what's being told to Aaron. What is written above the matter, as in about the matter? So it came to pass on the day that Moshe had finished, the princes of Israel, the heads of their ancestral homes, and the princes of the tribes made their offerings. All the princes, the leaders of the tribes, are coming to bring the sacrifices. Afterwards, it says, this is what the verse says. If you look at it, it doesn't explain all this. It says, speak to Aaron when you set up the lamp. It went from, everybody's bringing sacrifices, And it's like, Aaron, set up the lights of the menorah. So the question is, what's the connection? Why do they put these two verses next to each other? Why does one story follow the other, basically? Because the text is related to each other. That's why they're very close to each other in occurrence in the Torah. Fear Hashem, you as holy ones, for those who fear him lack nothing. Verse, you find above that the 11 tribes made offerings, while the tribe of Levi made no offering. So it goes through all the tribes. Levi does not bring sacrifices. So while the tribe of Ephraim made offerings and all the princes made offerings, the prince of Levi did not. Who was the prince of Levi? As in, prince, we mean like who was the leader, the head of the tribe of Levi. This was Aaron, as it says, and you should write the name of Aaron upon the rod of Levi. You remember Korach rebelled against Moshe. He said, there's nepotism going on here. You're appointing Aaron to stuff. Why do we even need a leader? Blah, blah, blah. And then they would swallow them up, that whole thing. So one of the way that they prove that no, Aaron's been designated by God, they say, we're going to take the rods, write the tribe's name on it. We're going to put it here. We're going to see what happens. And then basically Aaron's blossomed to almonds and this whole thing. His name was written on the rod of Levi, the staff that represented Levi. Aaron's name was written on it. That's how we know he's the prince of the tribe. So Aaron did not make an offering with the princes. So he said, woe to me, perhaps it is because of me that Hashem is not accepting the tribe of Levi. Golden calf, maybe I tripped up somewhere and that's why Levi doesn't get offering. I want to participate in this service. Even Yosef has Menashe and Ephraim both got to give. How come we don't get to give? I want to give also. We want to be part of it. The Olam blessed be said to Moshe, go say unto Aaron, tell him, don't be afraid. You are destined for something greater than this. As in, what you're going to do is something even greater than all these sacrifices. What your service is going to be. Therefore, it's written, speak to Aaron when you set up. As in, here's the punchline where everything's going to tie together. The offerings remain in force as long as the Beis Hamikdash stands. But the lamps are forever in front of the menorah. And all the blessings I have given you to bless my children shall never cease. This is talking about the Berachas Kohanim, that we always get the priestly blessing. Aaron felt bad. He's like, I can't bring the offerings. I want to bring the offerings. And then after that, it gives Aaron the instruction about lighting the menorah. What's the connection? Hashem told Moshe, tell Aaron, don't feel bad about the fact you don't get to offer offerings. What you have is going to be higher than that. What do you have? You light the menorah. How is that higher than the offerings? Because the offerings, we don't have sacrifices when there's no Beis Hamikdash. But the menorah we still have. So the menorah lasts forever, and the offerings, as long as the Beis Hamikdash stands. So that's why Aaron's service is something above it, which the night menorah never sees it. All the blessings that the priest can give, etc., this is forever. Ramban is Nachmanides. Ramban in this verse quotes Rabbi Nissim, who records another midrash. God told Moshe, tell Aaron that there will be another Chanukah. Chanukah means inauguration. That's actually what it means. It means they rededicate the temple. That's what Chanukah literally means. Tell Aaron there will be another Chanukah. When the kindling of lights will take place, I will perform miracle salvation inauguration for Israel. Through your descendants, this will be the inauguration of the Chashmonaim. Matisyahu, Mattathias and his sons, they were from the Chashmonaim family. They were priests. So they were from the tribe of Levi, as in from Aaron, because they were priests. That means that they were descendants of Aaron, because it became a family thing. The priests, it was passed on through the generations. So Ramban is saying, in the name of Rebbe Nissan, what was Moshe kind of saying here is that today there's this inauguration that's occurring, but there's going to be another inauguration, and that one they're going to light the menorah again, and that's going to come about through miracles and salvation, etc. that will come about. Ramban continues, the light of the menorah will never cease, for this alludes to the Chashmonai Chanukah lights, as in the lights, the Chanukah lights that Aaron's descendants gave us will never cease, which continue throughout exile. We're in exile, there's no sacrifices, we still have the lights of the menorah. Even after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, no more sacrifices. We were actually forbidden from offering sacrifices. Once the Beis HaMikdash was built, you were only allowed to offer sacrifices there. That was limited, that was seized. The lights of the menorah, that Aaron originally was the one lighting the menorah, and how his descendants, quote unquote, gave us the lights of the menorah, even in the deep, dark, redoubled exile, they have never ceased. They're forever. And then the Rebbe concludes, of course, as the Chanukah lights are eternal, the redemption of Mashiach will be eternal. Exile will no longer